Good afternoon, everyone. 4 o'clock straight up on a Thursday edition of Middays with Q. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones. 2 hours to play with. We'll take you up to 6 o'clock straight up on this 7th of August, 2025. A little thought out Thursday edition of Middays with Q. As always, you can get involved in the conversation. You can tweet at me. You can comment on the YouTube channels respectively. You can also follow along on Facebook on Triax57, Triax57.com, Facebook Live. Busy show today, NFL heavy. Lloyd's going to join us for a double dip later on in the 5 o'clock hour. You got a lot of injuries going on, by the way, in the NFL. A substantial amount of injuries going on in the NFL. And we are not even, I guess you can say, in the mix when it comes to the preseason, which, oh, by the way, preseason football tonight. So there you have it. You get to wet your whistle a little bit this evening. Colts, Ravens, Eagles, and then you got the Raiders in Seattle. I know people will probably watch tomorrow night to see what Shador does or doesn't do with the Browns. The Giants play on Saturday. So interesting stuff going on in the NFL. As I mentioned, a lot of injuries. Lloyd's going to join me 5 o'clock hour. We're going to take a look at some player props as far as these running backs, but I always encourage you guys to get in on the conversation. You can tweet at me at RichQ and of course on IG, RichQ. TikTok, Rich Q on the mic, as we're posting some content on those platforms, in addition to what we're doing on the YouTube channel. So I was thinking about this earlier today. When Lloyd comes on in the 5 o'clock hour, we'll go through these running backs and these player props and whatnot. But these injuries right now, not so much. You kind of wait and see approach how it's going to affect some of the win totals for these teams going forward. But I always enjoy the preseason, and there's a reason I enjoy it, because this is where you get to kind of watch and you get to kind of speculate and you play that little dicey game, and it's always a dicey game where we figure out who's going to make the cut, who's not going to make the cut. And I think it's fascinating to watch what's going to go on with Cleveland. I really do. And I heard a lot of talking heads over the last 24, 48 hours sit there and say that the Browns are setting up Shador Sanders to fail. So the reason I bring that up is because with all these young quarterbacks, a lot of teams believe that, well, wait a second. If it doesn't work out, we'll just turn around and, hey, we'll get in the Arch Manning sweepstakes. Now, I don't know if you heard what Archie Manning said today, but Grandpa Manning basically said grandson is not leaving Texas after the 2025 season. He says he's not going to declare for the 2026 NFL draft. So all these teams that were, I guess you can say, waiting in the dark behind the bushes to see what happens with Arch Manning, because some of these teams are already thinking ahead. Some of these teams believe this season is a lost season, right? Because everyone has their eyes set on what Arch Manning does. You're talking about the body of work, the pedigree, the bloodline, the family history. We need the body of work, but the family history, everyone's thinking who's going to be in line for the prize, right? The pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And it looks like right now, you're going to have to wait a little bit. It's not going to be the team that gets the first crack, because he's not going anywhere. And I'm looking around the NFL and I'm saying to myself, what teams are going to be quarterback hungry, quarterback needy? Not this season, but I'm looking ahead to next, because how I believe it's going to play out with some of these quarterbacks already. How it's going to play out with these quarterbacks already. And I can tell you right now, we run through this, and everyone always thinks there's, these guarantees. Now, Archie Manning can say what he wants, and ultimately it's going to come down to the kid's decision. But the grandfather and the father, obviously, they have influence. We know that. I think they want to see what this kid can do, get some games under his belt, see what he can do with Texas, and who knows, maybe next year turn around and win a Heisman. I don't know. And then the draft stock goes up. But I'm already looking at these teams going into the season. And by all accounts, Fields is struggling. By all accounts, Caleb Williams is already struggling. By all accounts, Russell Wilson, as we know, is not going to be the answer for the Giants, and we don't know if it's going to be Dart. Who knows? We don't know. Cleveland has 17 quarterbacks on the roster, and we don't believe anyone is going to be very good or at least hang around for 10 years, right? Stafford's getting older. He's got issues with his back. Tua is injury prone and constantly concussed. We don't really know what the plan is in Seattle, and we don't know what the plan is in Las Vegas. Yes, Darnold, Geno Smith, respectively, but we know how it is in the NFL. We know how it is in the NFL. You know, you're hoping that Ward plays well for Tennessee and the kid's going to be a franchise quarterback. But there are already Minnesota, the conflicting reports with their quarterback. There are so many teams now that were probably saying to themselves, we have a plan A. We got a plan A, and he's going to come out. He's going to come out. It's a done deal. It's a done deal. We are going to be part of the Arch Manning sweepstakes. And now what happens? Not necessarily the case. And now your you-know-what goes to you-know-what, right? Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And now I think some of these teams are looking around saying, oh, Christ, this isn't good. This is not good. And I think that's also, and this is me, I think this also is going to put more pressure on some of these coaches to maybe do some things that they ordinarily wouldn't do. Because they figure if they can get through this season unscathed, and some of those teams that I gave you, some of those coaches, we already know going into the season are on the hot seat. McDaniel is on the hot seat in Miami. Brian Daboll is in the hot seat, on the hot seat in New York. We already know about Stefanski in Cleveland. We already know about Tomlin in Pittsburgh. I mean, McVay, hey, what have you done for me lately? That's the NFL. So we know some of these coaches are already on that proverbial hot seat, and it might make them do something foolish. It might make them do something rash. I'm not saying that's going to be the case, but it's fascinating. Training camp, preseason, game one, college football right around the corner. Texas goes on the road to Ohio State. We will uberly put that in a microscope, that game, and either overreact or underreact come that Monday afterwards. But now the news comes down and it doesn't look like Arch is going anywhere. Now, again, it can just be grandpa speak, dad speak, Manning speak. But I find it very interesting with everything going on with some of these teams that we talked about. And now I also believe Arch is looking around saying there's not a good spot and a fit right now for my grandkid. There's not a good fit and not a good spot. And like I say, I'm going to tell you this. I think ultimately it's so hard to judge these quarterbacks. It is so we want every quarterback to be a Montana. We want every quarterback to be a Marino, an Elway, a Peyton Manning, a Tom Brady, a Mahomes. It's so hard to find a great quarterback. And if you find one, you still have to coach him up. You still have to develop him. And if you don't have patience with the quarterback, what typically happens? The head coach gets fired, and the quarterback either gets benched, he gets cut, he gets released, he gets jettisoned. Sometimes they go to a different place and they flourish, they blossom. We've seen high draft picks before. It's been rare, but we have seen high draft picks in the NFL turn their careers around because all they needed was a team that was not going to give up on them. A team that decides this is a good fit. And I mentioned to Lloyd last week, for the older audience out there, the best example you can think of is Jim Plunkett. I mean, Jim Plunkett is the poster boy for that second arc of a career. Jim Plunkett was the number one overall draft pick in 1971. He had 4 unfulfilling seasons with New England. Then he went to the 49ers, which people forget, for a year, got cut, and was thinking, I'm going to be out of football. I can't last. It's not going to happen for me. Like, he won 6, 7 games. He showed a little bit of a flash, but 49ers didn't want him. They were like, see ya. Here we go. So what happens? He turns around and the 49ers trade him, by the way, in exchange for another quarterback for Tom Owen and 2 first-round picks in 76 and a second-round pick in 77. So there you go. He joins the Raiders in 78. So he was basically a reserve, and he was traded, I should say, in 76 to the 49ers. But he joined the Raiders in 78. And he basically threw no passes. You and I threw the same amount of passes in 1978 or that season that Jim Plunkett did. He threw 15 in 1979. But then he stepped into the role in 80. And obviously, we know the rest. He won 2 Super Bowls with the Raiders. He had a second arc of his career. So some of these quarterbacks that we're looking at, these young quarterbacks, we don't know what they're going to be. Nobody knows. You can't tell me what Arch Manning is going to be. You can't. You can't tell me that. You can't. You can't tell me what Ward's going to be. You can't tell me what even Shedeur Sanders is going to be. We might think they might not be good quarterbacks. We can have an opinion and based on what we watch or hear or research or read, say, I just don't think this guy's going to be good. But I can't tell you if he's going to be, I can't sit here and say he's going to be great, he's going to be bad, we don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody has a crystal ball. I can only give you my thought, my opinion. But at the end of the day, let's be honest. No one knows. Nobody. I don't give a damn what talking head or expert. They're not 100% right. They're not. Because for everyone sits there, well, Kuiper says this about Shedeur Sanders. You know how many times Kuiper has been wrong? McShay has been wrong. Cosell has been wrong. You know how many times Baldy has been wrong? These guys have been wrong. They're never right. At least 100% of the time they're not. But once in a while, they're accurate, sure. But more times than not, no one knows. It's like that line in Moneyball when Brad Pitt was like, you don't know. You didn't sit in those kitchens, in those living rooms. You don't know. No one knows. Nobody. All we can do is give an opinion based on what we see, what we hear, what we believe. And yes, there are some quarterbacks I look at, and in my heart of hearts, I just don't think they're good quarterbacks. I've seen enough. I'm writing them off. And there are some quarterbacks that I want to give a little more time. I want to have a little patience. And there are some quarterbacks you can see right off the bat, man, that guy's playing on a Saturday. That kid's going to be playing on a Sunday. That's how good this kid's going to be. Nobody knows how good Arch Manning is going to be. What if he turns around and bombs? What if he goes on the road and gets waxed by 35 points to open up the season against Ohio State and the kid loses his confidence and never recovers? Then what? Then what? So all these teams that are waiting in the willows, right, and tap dancing among the tulips waiting for Arch Manning, get your you-know-what in order. Get your affairs in order. At this moment, the season, NFL, it starts. Yeah, it started last Thursday, but in all honesty, it starts now. You get the full slate of preseason. You're going to see some kids get some meaningful reps and snaps, and that's what it's all about. So for those teams that I mentioned, you better come up with a plan B right away, or you better try to play the hand you've been dealt. Because these teams that I was talking about and I've highlighted ad nauseum, they've got bridge quarterbacks. They've got issues at the quarterback spot. But nobody knows. You cannot tell me. You cannot tell me with confidence, with arrogance, with bravado, this guy's going to be great. This guy's going to be great. This guy. Nah. Nope. You can have an idea. You can have an idea of how they might be. Like, I'm curious to see Sanders. And I heard people saying that Cleveland's setting him up to fail. Cleveland is setting him up to fail. Well, the kid's going to have an opportunity to play. He's going to get snaps. The problem is not Shedeur Sanders. The problem is the Cleveland Browns. I mean, that's really what it is. It's the Browns. It's Cleveland. It's how that franchise is run. Yeah, did he hurt his stock in some capacity? Yeah, of course. We don't need to rehash it. But the Browns are a franchise that has no clue what they're doing when it comes to the quarterback position. So what happens? Players, their careers go there to die, or they don't get a fair shake. They don't get a fair shot. There's a difference. Setting you up for fail and not getting a fair shot are two different things. This kid's going to have an opportunity to go out, and he's going to get maybe a couple series. And then you build upon that. And I know that Flacco will get the start, but they have elected, to keep this kid on the roster. The kid Gabriel's not good. He's just not good. Go with 3 quarterbacks. And if you believe low risk to high reward with Shedeur Sanders, then you make him the backup to Flacco, and you just wait it out and see and see what's going to happen. But I don't believe that's the case. And that's a Cleveland Browns. That's an organizational problem. It's who they are. They have no idea what the hell they're doing. You got an owner that gave guaranteed money, every friggin' cent to Deshaun Watson. How'd that work out? $230 million fully guaranteed money, which was just a gigantic big swing and a miss. I mean, that alone, they should have ran you out of town. And yeah, do I think Haslam's comments were classy and professional? No. I thought they were passive aggressive when he was talking about Sanders. And those comments are telling, right? Yeah. Because like I said, he didn't say that because he didn't think Sanders was going to be available in the 5th round. He said it because he never wanted the kid to begin with. So if I'm the kid, I go out and I make the decision harder for him. I go out and I sling it. Why not? Take shots, take chances. Don't play scared. Play loose. And if it doesn't work out with Cleveland, maybe another team grabs you. But these teams should not be thinking Arch Manning next year. They shouldn't. Deal with your problems in-house. Deal with your problems in-house. All right, 17 past 4 o'clock hour. Cranking up on a thawed out Thursday edition of Middays with Q. Quick timeout. I promise we will get to your comments on the other side. A lot of NFL to get into, some player props. We got to go through these injuries. I mean, my goodness, players are dropping like flies. They are absolutely dropping like flies right now. Guys are being carted off. My goodness. Seeing the Slater with the Chargers. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, right? Injured his leg. We'll get into the Jets too, because that's one of the other teams I want to talk about because of the field situation. So we'll go around the league. Lloyd Vance, 5 o'clock hour. Get you caught up to speed with some baseball scores. We'll update some of the standings as well. We've got some thoughts as well for some of these running back props for 2025. All right, keep it locked in. I see your comments coming in. I always enjoy when you guys fire off the comments. We'll read them off on the other side. We'll take you up to 6. Keep it locked in. 18 past 4 o'clock hour on a Thursday edition of Middays with Q, the 7th of August, 2025.
This is what the Down Beach Seafood Fest is all about. It's about community, it's about friends, it's about culture, right? The food culture in Atlantic County is rich.
Become a champion with us in Atlantic City.
This is Kensington Furniture. 113 years experience and 2 acres of selection. Save more at our best brand sale, up to 70% off. We pay your sales tax. 0 down, up to 60 months interest-free. Lazy Boy, Bassett, Bernhardt, Jonathan Lewis, sofas, sectionals, reclining living rooms, bedrooms, dining rooms, up to 70% off. We pay your sales tax. 0 down, up to 60 months interest-free. Now at Kensington Furniture. This is Kensington Furniture. 113 years experience and 2 acres of selection. Save more at our best brand sale, up to 70% off. We pay your sales tax. 0 down, up to 60 months interest-free. Lazy Boy, Bassett, Bernhardt, Jonathan Lewis, sofas, sectionals, reclining living rooms, bedrooms, dining rooms, up to 70% off. We pay your sales tax. 0 down, up to 60 months interest-free. Now.
Hi, I'm Bruce Pesco. I'm very fortunate. Years ago, I found something that I genuinely like to do, and it's something that helps other people. What I do is help people transition from traditional health insurance into Medicare. I've been doing it here in Atlantic County for more than 20 years. If you're getting ready for Medicare, call me for a free consultation. 609-484-9800.
All right, welcome back, everyone. A Thursday edition Middays with Hugh. Don't forget to get social with me as always. Rich Quinones here. We are also on X, also on my multiple YouTube channels as well. Let's get to some of the comments, see what you guys have to say out there on a busy Thursday. Man peeking in. All right. Vince peeking in, double up. Vince talking about, I said that 1 week ago, sir. Thank you. Check the tape. I guess, what are we referring about? I mean, a lot of people thought Arch wasn't going to come out. So all these coaches banging on QBs next year, hoping to get Arch, definitely should get fired, maybe tomorrow. Is that a rhetorical question? Or are you asking me? No. What I'm saying is that you've got these coaches and their mindset. I think some of them were thinking long-term because they realized that this year is a wasted year. And now all of a sudden you got to scramble. Look, coaches think long-term. Coaches don't think day by day. They don't go hour by hour, minute by minute, second by second, like, other people or normal people or other, people in everyday walks of life do. They're looking at today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. They don't live in a moment because God knows what's going to happen with the roster. They're an injury away. They have to have a backup plan. They also know that their jobs are on the line. So hell yeah. So are GMs. They're definitely, listen, they know, wow, hey man, let's bring in Russell. Let's bring in Jameis. Let's bring in Flacco. Bridge quarterback. If it doesn't work out, listen, we'll ride it out. We'll state our case and then we'll have a high draft pick. And hey, here's a couple quarterbacks. Why do you think they have scouts that are going to these games? Right? No way the next Patrick Mahomes. I mean, I don't know who that is. Caleb Williams is struggling. All I've heard is how he's a lock to be the next great quarterback. Are you kidding me? His accuracy stinks during training camp. What are you watching? There's like reports of his frustration, even during mini camp and now the training camp, his accuracy has been off. He's been emotional. He's been erratic. Listen, that team, the Bears are going to be to some extent a team that's going to be under a microscope because you got a first-year head coach in Ben Johnson. And Ben Johnson's job is to do what now? Develop Caleb Williams into a franchise quarterback. Caleb Williams is not a franchise quarterback right now. He's not. So just stop. Stop. But you're already starting to see the frustration boil in. Now, I like the kid personally. I do. I like the kid. I think he can play. And I think, everyone made a big stink about what transpired in USC. And if you recall, I said, it's not going to affect his draft status, but they need to keep that kid upright. That's it. That kid was sacked 67 times last year. If that kid's, if he starts to see ghosts and he can't see past these linemen and these edge rushers coming in and over these corners with the deep ball, and he's on his fanny, there's going to be a lot of frustration settling in. And that's never what you want if you're a first-year head coach trying to groom a quarterback and make a 22, 23-year-old franchise quarterback. But he's been off. He's been off. Now, there's no next Patrick Mahomes. There's no next Tom Brady. There's no next Peyton Manning, Joe Montana, Dan Marino. They're not. You're just a quarterback is a quarterback. That's it. Quarterback is a quarterback. You want to compare him to other quarterbacks? Go have fun, man. You want to build a perfect quarterback? Go have fun. Go enjoy. Go ahead. Do whatever. Have a couple pops. Go to the bar. Watch the games. Man, look at these guys. Look at the way he scrambles like so-and-so. Look at the way he throws the ball and reads these defenses. Look at the way he improvises, how he just slides a little bit to his left and to his right. That's fine. There's no perfect quarterback. And every quarterback is so different. They all have different traits, characteristics, and skill sets. Lamar Jackson, for years, we used to peg on him and say, look, he's not an accurate quarterback. But we glossed over it because he was very athletic and he could scramble. Now you look at him, he looks like he's a very good pocket passer, pure pocket passer. For years we sat there and said, check out Aaron Rodgers' footwork. That's his strength. Look at the way he slides. But yet with Favre, he would roll out and throw across his body, but Favre made it happen. But that's a no-no. But we watched it anyway and said, oh man, look what he can do. Look what he can't do. Right? I mean, so, we have these, we come out with our own opinion of guys right away. Different quarterbacks, they lead certain ways. Brady was a fiery guy. Eli was just a guy that just nothing fazed him. Peyton Manning was more of a fiery guy. Drew Brees was, fiery, but at times kind of even keeled. So there's no perfect quarterback. I mean, there just isn't. Patrick Mahomes is human. Brady was human. Peyton Manning was human. Montana was human. Bradshaw was human. Bart Starr was human. So when we try to compare these guys, it's like when we do the whole argument in the NBA. We can try to draw a player comp, certainly. But there's no the next Patrick Mahomes. There's no the next Peyton Manning. Those guys, they're isolated. They're exceptional talents. They're Hall of Fame quarterbacks. And some of these young guys, you guys want to, you want a stamp of approval right away. You guys think a series in friggin' preseason defines a quarterback, makes a quarterback. You get your reps if you're a young quarterback. That's what we're trying to figure out. But give me that game speed. Let me see you do it on a Sunday. I mean, and honestly, guys, let's be fully transparent here. Around the NFL, all these great quarterbacks that we're talking about, the handful of great quarterbacks, 4 or 5 handful of quarterbacks, some of them, they're not, if you were to grade out and say, okay, this guy does everything at a 9 and an 8 and a 10, if we're looking at 5 different categories of that perfect quarterback, none of these guys are scoring 10 out of 10. Even Josh Allen at times, who's an MVP. Josh Allen at times can drive you crazy because he might have that bad turnover. He might scramble when he should have sat in the pocket. He might sit in the pocket when he should have scrambled. There's no perfect quarterback. You got to find the guy that works for you. You got to find the guy that's going to work within your system. You have certain traits that you're looking for when you're drafting these young guys. But the NFL is so unique. This is what makes the NFL just special when we try to compare it with other sports. Because you got 5 pitchers, you go 6 pitchers, you got a rotation, you got the middle relief, you got the bullpen. In the NHL, yeah, you got, your players, and you got the guys that can come in, score on the power play, kill off the power play. You look at your centers, your wings, your forwards, fine. Not one guy's going to change the whole complexion of a franchise. Now, it can help that growth, no doubt. The NBA, a little bit of a different animal. Back in the day, you get that center, you get that lottery pick. You still have to have that Robin to that Batman. Then they can change the franchise. But in the NFL, a quarterback can turn your franchise around like that. That's what makes the quarterbacking position and the NFL to me so unique. College football in general so unique because it can really take one man. Now, yes, you got 11 on 11 both sides of football, but the franchise quarterback, we don't sit there and say franchise center. We don't sit there and say franchise pitcher. We don't sit there and say franchise goalie. We say franchise quarterback. Franchise quarterback. And they don't grow on trees. They don't. If you are lucky, I've said this for years. If you are lucky to draft a quarterback, top 5, top 10, first pick overall. And that quarterback is accessible. That quarterback is consistently good. That quarterback plays every game. He doesn't miss time. Maybe he leads you into a couple playoffs. Maybe you win a division. Maybe you win some playoff games. Maybe you get to a championship game. If you get to a Super Bowl and win it, your return on your investment, you got it, tenfold. You got a 10 bagger right there, 20 bagger, 30 bagger. You're not going to really say that when it comes to these other sports. Yeah, you want a 20-game pitcher? Great. You want a dominant center? Great. You still need the pieces around these guys to make deep runs come playoff time, come the postseason. These are stopgaps here and there that can win you some games, some big games. But in football, you don't have a franchise quarterback. You're done. You're done. You are done. Even a good quarterback, a serviceable quarterback. And these teams that I've highlighted when I came on the air, some of these teams have no idea what the hell they're doing at the quarterback position. The Jets are hoping that Justin Fields turns into a franchise quarterback, right? But you're not getting your Hurts, your Patty Mahomes, your Lamar Jackson, your Burrow, you're out. They're a dime a dozen, man. These serviceable guys are. But the franchise quarterback, you grab them and you hold on to them for dear life because they don't always exist. And a team like the Cleveland Browns, for years the Jets, for years Tampa Bay, even Cincinnati, Washington. Think about all those quarterbacks the Washington, then Redskins, now Commanders franchise has gone through. I mean, horrible. No clue what the heck they were doing. The Brad Johnsons, the Jeff Georges, the Tony Banks, the Shane Matthews, Danny Warfel, awful. Patrick Ramsey. You had the cup of coffee with RG3, and we know how that turned out. Then you had, remember Jason Campbell? You thought he was going to be the answer? Jason Campbell for a couple years. You had the horrible experiment with McNabb, Rex Grossman, John Beck, RG3, and then you had Kirk Cousins. And then you bounced around to a couple guys, Alex Smith, Henneke, Fitzpatrick, Howe. Now, after, let's say prior to Jaden Daniels, you maybe sit there and say Kirk Cousins was a franchise quarterback because Kirk Cousins played for about 5 seasons, 6 seasons, right? But before Kirk Cousins, wasn't Gus Frerotte, Mark Rippon, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93. Then you got to go all the way back to Theismann. When Theismann played 4, 5, 6 years, right? Theismann and what was it? Joe Theismann bounced around with Billy Kilmer and, Billy Kilmer again, and then Billy Kilmer, and then Billy Kilmer one more year. Theismann finally got his shot in 79. So franchise quarterbacks, they don't fall out of the sky. They don't. And we need to stop with this. This guy is definitely a franchise quarterback after a series, after a couple wins. We still don't know if CJ Stroud is a franchise quarterback. We don't know if Caleb Williams is a franchise quarterback. We still don't know, what if. Now follow me for a second. Just follow me for a second. And I'm not adding injuries because anyone can get injured, right? But, do we know if Ward's going to be a franchise quarterback? We don't know. Do we really know at this moment, if Lawrence is a franchise quarterback, if Justin Herbert's a franchise quarterback? Do we really know? Bo Nix, is he a franchise quarterback? We want to think these guys are. We want to believe they are. But, man, they can struggle this year. They can have an off year. They can have a down year. They can have a run of 2 bad years. Maybe get banged up. Maybe get hurt because you have to throw that into the equation. Injuries, I know I just said we shouldn't, but you really do have to calculate that. We know there are 5 or 6 franchise quarterback in the NFL, and those 5 or 6 franchise or 6 or 7 franchise quarterback, those are your top 10. So I am interested to see what a kid like Fields is going to do with a lot of reps with the Jets. I'm interested to see what the Giants do with Dart. If they throw this kid out there sooner rather than later. I'm interested to see what Sanders is going to do with Cleveland and how they're going to play this. What if Sanders goes out and he plays the first 2 preseason games, if he plays against the Panthers and then the Eagles, and the Eagles notoriously, they're not going to play anyone. That's just what Sirianni does. I mean, Peterson used to do it as well. Andy Reid, a little different. But what if Sanders goes out tomorrow night and he has a couple really good series and he, leaves Cleveland 70 yards to, 70-yard drive and a touchdown. Now, are you guys going to sit there and say, well, the Panthers were playing their backups? Now what if he plays a whole quarter against the Eagles and goes 18 of 23 for $165 and 2 touchdowns and adds a couple nice little scrambles? Well, Eagles are playing the backups. Like, that's what I'm saying. So it's like this is where I'm actually going to defend these guys, right? This is where I'm going to defend these guys, because it's very easy to sit there and say they're playing against. But yet if you go out and you play well, you play well. You should still give credit. Want to meet me at the link next week to scout Sanders up close and personal? No, I'm good. Thank you, though. I appreciate the offer. Should Dart play a full half this week in the preseason? Dart has to get reps. Yep. He has to. He has to get reps. He has to, because I already told you, Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston are not your answer. Dart's going to play against Buffalo. Yeah, he's going to get snaps. But again, don't get carried away. It's not the official start of the Jackson Dart era for the Giants. But you drafted this kid 25 overall. Guess what? He's going to get live action when they play the Bills on Saturday, period. And Dable knows this. Here's the difference. Those other head coaches, you already know what you have in your quarterbacks, right? McDermott, Allen, Harbaugh, Jackson, Sirianni, Hurts. So Dable's thinking, I got to get young guys out there and get what? Live game experience, live game action. It's priceless. Get it out, man. You know what? If you make mistakes, get the butterflies, get the nerves, get it out there. Get it out there, because listen, young guys will remember it could be their height of their career, man. They can get cut. Now, a guy like Jackson Dart, I'm not going to say he is, but you want to get as many reps as you can, because that translates into Sunday. It does. It really does. And listen, he's playing. Oh, he's playing. Now, I don't know how much burn he's going to get. I don't know if it's going to be a whole half. I don't know if it's going to be a quarter. I don't know if it's going to be a couple series. But he can go 5 of 6 for 76 yards and a touchdown. That does not necessarily mean, boom, playing him is the number 1 starter. Put him in as a week 1 starter. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't. There are some franchises that, when they drafted, they drafted these quarterbacks, you knew right away that they were going to play. You knew right away. There was no, let's kind of wait and see. Let's kind of wait and see how this guy reacts. And no. And some quarterbacks, because they were thrown right to the wolves. I mean, look, Troy Aikman didn't start, 16 games his rookie season. Troy Aikman played 11 games. He started 11 games. And Troy Aikman didn't win a game. And Troy Aikman, will tell you, he went on record, said it was obviously one of the hardest years of his not only professional life, but of his life as a 23-year-old. Couldn't get a win, looked beyond overwhelmed, got sacked 160-something odd times. But man, they hung in there. And they also, it helps when you build an offensive line around a quarterback. Troy Aikman, he didn't put up the gaudy, sexy numbers, but all this guy did is win, and he won in the preseason. I'm sorry, he won in the playoffs. Pardon me. He won in the playoffs. He won 11 games in the playoffs, and let's not talk about all the Super Bowl wins. Great quarterback, tough as they come, but he had to endure it. They threw him to the wolves, man. They threw him to the wolves. I mean, they were a horrible, horrible team. But what, the decision was what? I got to see what this kid has. I got to see what this kid has. What's he made? We know he's tough. He dealt with injuries, collarbone in college. We know this kid is tough, but we're going to throw him out there. And that's exactly what they did, and it worked out. And there are some quarterbacks years ago, they were benched. They were backups. I mean, think about it. Aaron Rodgers, right? Patrick Mahomes had to wait for Alex Smith. Aaron Rodgers had to wait for the nonsense with Brett Favre. Guys have to sit and wait a little bit. I don't think we're there anymore, right? I don't think we're there anymore. Should it just be Jackson and Tommy playing? Should it be Jay? No, listen, Wilson's got to, I think, Russell Wilson's got to get some reps. And DeVito, no one cares about Tommy DeVito. He's I mean, there's no reason for him to even be on the team. You're not going to, they'd be foolish to sit there and carry, 4 quarterbacks. I mean, I don't even think he's on the roster, to be quite honest with you. Tommy DeVito, I mean, just, long gone, right? So, I don't need to see him. I mean, they didn't want that kid to throw the football against the Jets. I know he re-signed on the 1-year deal, but to me, I just, I don't need him on the roster. You got Jameis Winston, right? Unless you're going to try to trade Jameis Winston, you just go into the season with 2 quarterbacks. Teams have done it. But you already know what you have in Winston. I want to see Russell Wilson out there a little bit, get a rapport, get your feet wet. We know what Russell Wilson does, but I'm just saying I want to see him work. With Slayton, with Neighbors, with Hyatt, with Tracy. I want to see how that offense looks. They're not going to show you too much. They're just not. But it's funny you mentioned the Giants too, because a lot of pundits are kind of high on the Giants. When I say high, they kind of like their future. And what are we basing it on? Are we basing it on Jackson Dart? Are we basing it on the fact that, they drafted Carter, who looks to be a beast? But again, I got to see it on Sunday when he's doubled and triple teamed, right? They added some nice pieces. They had a very solid draft, but I still don't, I'm not entirely sold on their, how do I say this? I wouldn't say plan of attack. I would say their overall plan, right? Their franchise plan. Like, where are we going? What is the goal here? Is the goal to get the young kid reps and see what we have? Is the goal to, get some winning football out of Russell Wilson and win games so I can save my job as a head coach, or I can save my job as a GM? Is that the goal? I mean, for selfish reasons, sure. I don't want to get fired. Who wants to get fired? But the Giants are kind of in this flux. And I've always said this about the Giants, going back to Eli. What they did is they saw that they felt they can squeeze a couple more really good seasons out of Eli Manning. And look, Eli Manning, was always going to put up, your 25, 30, 30 plus touchdowns, 25. He was good for that. He was going to throw for a lot of yards. And where they made the mistake is the year that they made the playoffs with McAdoo, he had a very good season. Now they come back in 15 and that was the debacle. I'm sorry, in 17 and that was the debacle. Because that's when they had McAdoo. They fired him after 12 games. They had Spags for 4 games. Then they come back with Shermer, and you just knew it wasn't going to work. They never addressed the offensive line. They never did. And Manning was running for his life again. And they had really, you had the issues with the nonsense with Beckham, and then he missed some time. But, Eli Manning was sacked 60 times that year. They made the mistake. We're going to try to squeeze more blood out of a stone. We're not going to fix the line. We're going to just go by this guy's, pedigree and his championship pedigree. And we're just going to ride Eli for another 2 years and see if we can make a run here. It was a mistake. He wasn't the same quarterback. They didn't have pieces around. The offensive line was garbage. And that's when you start to have coordinators getting fired, head coaches getting fired, GMs getting fired, and you become a rudderless ship. And obviously, it was a horrible draft choice by Gettleman to draft Daniel Jones, and it was even a worse decision by Joe Shane to give him a contract extension. So now this is where they're at. The Giants are pretty much where Cleveland is always at. The Giants are where Tampa used to be, where the Jets used to be, where Cincinnati used to be. They don't really have direction. That's what I'm looking for. They don't have direction. They don't. They don't. They're hoping that Russell Wilson comes in and lights the world on fire and turns back the clock, and they get ahead in a couple games and they're blowing out teams, and then they can quietly get Jackson Dart to get some reps and get his feet wet, and maybe they win 7-8 games, and Dayball keeps his job and Shane keeps his job, and they get a couple of nice little draft picks, or maybe they spend some money at free agent signings, and then, okay, you know what, Russ, we're going to give you another season, but the kid's right there. The kid's right there. Or maybe they just decide, thanks for getting us through the season, and now that we're 5-10, let's get the kid in there for a couple games. Or we're 6-8, let's get the kid in there for a couple games. We're not going to go anywhere. And I don't even know. Can you see if a kid's a franchise quarterback in 2 or 3 games? I mean, is that fair? I don't know. It's different. When they drafted Eli Manning, Eli had to sit, and then they basically benched Warner, and then they went to Eli, and they had a horrible losing streak, and then they finally won the last game of the season. Tiki Barber takes it in Sunday Night Football against the Dallas Cowboys. The next year, they come back, and they win 11 games. I mean, think about it. Eli went 11-5, 8-8, 10-6, 12-4, 8-8, 10-6, 9-7, 9-7. Back end of his career, not as good, but they really didn't have a lot of pieces. And they had a horrible offensive line. Now, I'm not making excuses. But what I'm saying, that's the reality with some of these quarterbacks. So you look at a guy like Caleb Williams, you better damn well fix that offensive line. That kid's not going to last 5 years in the NFL. You look at Tua, he's always concussed. I mean, Fields has bounced around. He hasn't found a fit. So how much wiggle room are the Jets going to give Justin Fields? It's a 2-year contract. It's low risk, high reward. I say if I'm Justin Fields, go out there and make mistakes. Go out there. It's okay. Make mistakes. Play loose. Play loose. Now, I know he struggled and he's had some issues, but are you really going to go with a Taylor who's already banged up? He's a journeyman quarterback. You're going to throw a Martinez or a Cook out there? If you're Fields, you're in a good spot in this regard. You can suck up the joint, but you're not getting benched. So this is a huge year for Justin Fields. Now, does it save his career? Is he going to salvage his career? I don't know. But he's in a different spot, fresh start. Again, we look at him. This is a 11th overall draft pick, and right now it looks like a miss. Trey Lance, beyond a miss. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying. Nick and Waterford chimes in. Q, excellent talk on the quarterback competition. I look at these draft picks and I say, what about 30, 40, 50 years ago? We had a lot more patience with the quarterback. We don't do it anymore. And as you mentioned, it is sink or swim. Yeah, you're going back to when you drafted a quarterback in the 70s or 80s, he was starting. The guy, if you go back and you look at that, what was that 84 draft class, right? We always talk about that 1984, that ridiculous draft class. 1983 draft class, right? Marino, Kenny O'Brien, my goodness, Elway, right? Blackledge, Jim Kelly. I mean, this 83, 84, 85, around that time. I mean, these guys, man, Jim Kelly was a little different because obviously when Jim Kelly was a rookie in the NFL, he was already 26 years old. He had his USFL days. So, when he came, he, been around the block, 26. But he started right away. Yeah, the days of, I believe, having guys sit, I don't know, man. I'm a little indifferent with it. I really am. Especially if I'm a head coach or a GM and I know my job is on the line. I want to see, if I'm drafting a kid in the first round, if I'm drafting a quarterback in the first, let me say, let me rephrase that. If I'm drafting a quarterback, top 15, top 20, top 15 is fair. Top 15. I mean, it's exception to the rule with the Giants did because they need a quarterback. Or if I need a quarterback and I draft one in the first round, let's just say that. I want to see what the kid has sooner rather than later. I don't want to wait because I understand my job's on the line. And if the kid doesn't perform well, that's on me. That's on me because I drafted him. No matter what, I'm going to sink or swim. Like a GM and a head coach, they are joined at the hip when they draft a quarterback. Like, it's not even debatable. He's my guy. I drafted him. Well, it didn't work out. You're out of a job. And that partnership, that relationship, it's so different in so many other sports. Sarge chimes in. Q, how would you define a franchise quarterback? I've said it before. My definition, franchise quarterback is a quarterback that starts, quarterback that's out there, accessible, consistent, wins. But I look at a quarterback that can you be around? Can you hang around for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, 8, 9, 10 years and be under center, be the face of my franchise? Can we win games? Are we going to win games? You better win me games. Are we going to get to the playoffs? We're going to win playoff games. Can we get to, the Super Bowl? Can we win a Super Bowl? Man, you get that? Oh, my goodness. Salim chimes in. Q, would you equate Jaden Daniels, would you say right now as a franchise quarterback? Do we not say there are sometimes exceptions to the rule? From what I've seen, he's got the makeup. I watched a lot of Daniels last year. He definitely, you take a team, your rookie season, you put up those numbers and you take a team to an NFC championship and you make plays and you get the keys to the castle right away. I believe he's, if I see it again this year, yeah, he's a bona fide. I think the kid's going to be a star. I think he's on the cusp of becoming a star. But I look at him and say, yeah, he's that early on the career definition of that franchise quarterback. And I would say the same thing. I'm high on Bo Nix. I believe Denver can win a lot of football games with Bo Nix. I believe you have the right head coach. They're entrusting him to throw the ball down the field. They really are. If this was a Hackett with Denver, that kid's probably going to average what? 4 yards a pass play. Now, he only averaged 6.7 last year, but again, rookie, but put up some pretty good numbers. As a rookie, I think now Sean Payton is going to entrust him to take some shots down the field. I really do. So yeah, he has that makings, a 24, 25, 26-year-old quarterback. Can he be under center for Denver for the next decade? Absolutely. Yeah. Herbert, absolutely. I think Herbert is kind of in the same line of Lawrence. Like, we don't know what we really have. We see moments. We see flashes. Trevor Lawrence, and I have been criticized for being too big of a Trevor Lawrence fan because I loved him coming out of college. I just absolutely love Trevor Lawrence coming out of college. And, a couple years ago, I was like, this kid can flat out play. And that's the year, they made it to the playoffs. They had that, ridiculously, that crazy game, if you remember, in the playoffs, that just absolutely insane game. And I'm like, whoa. This kid, here you go. This is where we define a franchise quarterback. I give you Trevor Lawrence. They had that crazy win against the Chargers. They came from behind and they hung in there against Kansas City. And I'm like, this kid's a franchise quarterback. And maybe I jumped the gun, but I saw enough in year 2. He made that jump that we talk about, that jump year 1, year 2, 12 touchdown passes, 17 picks, 25 touchdown passes, 6 picks. He jumped from 36 to 4,100 yards. And oh, by the way, the team made it to second round of the playoffs. There's your franchise quarterback. Then he got, came back a little inconsistent. Again, you had issues with the coordinators and the head coach, and then last year hurt. Am I writing Lawrence off? Absolutely not. The kid's 25 years old, 26 years old. If he bounces back this year and gives me another year like that, then yeah. Now you sit there and say this kid's going to be around for 10 plus years with Jacksonville, face of the franchise. So every quarterback, I think, every story is different with some of these guys and how we gauge it and how we look at the quarterback position in the NFL. But it's a tough nut to crack, man. It really is. Because if you don't get it right, man, as a GM, as a head coach, you are going to be out of a job. You're going to be out of a job. All right, fast approaching 5 o'clock hour. Got a lot of comments coming in as well. I want to read them off. Some good tweets. At me, at Rich Quinones Q. Appreciate you guys keeping us locked in on a Thursday edition, Middays with Q. Triax57, Triax57 Facebook page as well. My X and YouTube channel. Lloyd Vance on the other side. We'll talk a little more about this quarterbacking carousel in the NFL. Quarterback position as well. Keep it locked in. 5 o'clock straight up on the East Coast. We'll take you to 6 on this Thursday in August.
This is what the Down Beach Seafood Fest is all about. It's about community, it's about friends, it's about culture, right? The food culture in Atlantic County is rich.
Hidden in an abandoned campground in South Jersey lies a mystical encounter with brews and spirits, where bonfires burn, shadows dance, and flavor favors the bold. Ghosts, ghouls, goblins, grown-ups, it's time to reclaim Halloween. This is Witchcraft, October 10th and 11th. For tickets and information, visit witchcraftnj.com.
This is what the Down Beach Seafood Fest is all about. It's about community, it's about friends, it's about culture, right? The food culture in Atlantic County is rich.
Become a champion with us in Atlantic City. Become a champion with us in Atlantic City.
Hi, I'm Bruce Pascoe. I'm very fortunate. Years ago, I found something that I genuinely like to do, and it's something that helps other people. What I do is help people transition from traditional health insurance into Medicare. I've been doing it here in Atlantic County for more than 20 years. If you're getting ready for Medicare, call me for a free consultation. 609 484-9800.
All right, 5 o'clock straight up. Let's rip through some of these comments. Kevin in Jackson chimes in. Q, I'm very excited to see Jackson Dart. I know you mentioned Russell Wilson as Jameis Winston as bridge quarterbacks. Again, I hate to ask this question in August. Laugh out loud. When do you realistically expect to see Jackson Dart take the field? It's such a loaded question. It really is. It depends on what the team does. Like, that's what I'm saying. They're stuck, Kevin. They're stuck between such a rock and a hard place. They are. Like, what happens if Russell Wilson comes out and the Giants are 6-3 after 9 games, and they're hanging around, and there's talk of them making the playoffs? Like, Jackson Dart's not going to see the field. So now you've sat that kid because now you've got 7 games to figure it out, 8 games to figure it out. And even if they, go 4-4, now they get to 10-7. Hey, Brian Daboll's coach of the year. Russell Wilson's comeback player of the year. And you've had this kid sit for an entire season. Sure, the diehard fan in me, I don't want to see the Giants stink. Do I rip the Giants, constantly crush them and kill them? Yeah. Does it bother me that they don't win? Yeah, it still bothers me that they don't win games on Sundays. It's frustrating. It's annoying. Part of me is like, I don't want to give up my time anymore because they're a joke of a franchise. I would love nothing more for them to win games. I mean, look, that season with Daniel Jones and Saquon, that they just unexpectedly, won games and went on the road and won a playoff game. I was excited. I remember that first game of the season. They blocked out field goal late, and that's after they go for 2. I remember my big man, the beast, Brandon Jacobs, called me up right there and said, they're going to win this game. I was pumped. And that was a fun season because, you didn't expect it. And they won a playoff game, and then they got humbled and overwhelmed against the Eagles, and you realize they were not on the level that a team like Philly was on. But that was also smoke and mirrors. And that's because I was still never sold on Daniel Jones. I was never sold. And maybe it's because Sims was my guy and then Eli was my guy. Like, the guys in between, the Dave Browns, the Kent Grahams, the Danny Cannells, even Kerry Collins, they weren't my guy. The Kurt Warners, they weren't my guy. It was number 11, number 10. So it's very hard to find that guy. It really is. It takes time. It takes a lot of swings and misses. Jared chimes in, Chargers fan Q, what do you think of the injury to Slater? That's not good. That's your left tackle, by the way. Rashawn Slater carted off with a leg injury. Not good. That's not good. I've got some high expectations on the Chargers as well this season. Now, I think that AFC West is going to be an absolute friggin' juggernaut. It really is. That AFC West, it's not going to be easy. And I still believe, sorry, Kansas City Chiefs fans, I believe this is a step back year for Kansas City. And by the way, they're allowed to have a step back year. The Kansas City Chiefs are allowed, is a down year for Kansas City only winning 11 games and maybe not winning a division and having to play in a wild card. That's okay. I mean, most franchises would take 10 of those in 15 years. Like, Kansas City is allowed to have a down year. They are. It's okay. Not every year you can't get a bye. You can't go, last year they won 15 games, but let's be honest, were they that great of a team? They weren't. They just got by Cincinnati. They just got by Atlanta. They just got by the Raiders. They beat the Bucs in overtime. They just squeaked by. They blocked that field goal against Denver. Carolina, they beat them by 3. The Raiders, the second time they beat them by 2. Like, everything was so close, and I know a lot of people will say, "Well, that's the mark of a really good team." It is, but not a great team. They were not a great team last year. They were a team that you started to see. Listen, Kansas City should not be winning games by 2 or 3 points. That's not who Kansas City is. Chuck in South Jersey chimes in. Q, agree with you 100%. It was smoke and mirrors. Look at all the games that they had to squeak by. They are an aging team, and I expect them to take a giant step back. No playoffs. Not going to go that far just yet. But to Chuck's point, in years past, did we look at the Kansas City Chiefs and as their season goes on, Kansas City, you're beating teams 41-10, 31-17, 24-8, 41-16. They didn't do that last year. It's one of the reasons that I think they take that step back. I do. I really do. I think, it catches up to you in the NFL. It is so hard to keep up that pace every single season because guys get older. Yup. It's very, very hard to just constantly go out there every single solitary week and perform at such a high level. I mean, it's remarkable what they have been able to do. It really is. All right, quick timeout. We're going to come back. Got to get these breaks in. Lloyd's going to join us on the other side. We're going to run through all these injuries in the NFL. We are also going to talk about the quarterbacking position. We'll have Lloyd define what he believes is a franchise quarterback. And we got running back player props totals as well coming up on the other side. Keep it locked in.
This is what the Down Beach Seafood Fest is all about. It's about community, it's about friends, it's about culture, right? The food culture in Atlantic County is rich.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Couple minutes past 5 o'clock hour. He was just relaxing in the Q room as we welcome in our good friend, little double dip of our good friend Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football. Of course, you can hear him every Monday night, 8 to 9 on SR 1029 FM The Game, Coastal Sports Digital Network, kind enough to join us. How are you, my friend?
Doing good, Q. I thought that was an interesting conversation when I was listening to a few minutes ago. You talking about the Chiefs, how they're going to have that downfall. I don't
Yeah,
know,
I
man.
think they take. I believe they take. It's funny because I saw Chris Sims kind of said the same thing. He said it'll be a recharge year. I think it's because I'm higher on the Chargers, and I'm a believer in the Denver Broncos. I mean, we'll get to that in a second. I definitely want to get your thoughts on the franchise quarterback. Like, I feel as though, and I bring this up because even if Sanders gets a ton of reps, we still don't know what the kid is. Even if Jackson Dart gets rep, like what your definition of a franchise quarterback could be different from mine. I'm wondering, what is Lloyd Vance's definition of a franchise quarterback?
Well, first and foremost, you want a guy who you can count on for 17 games. He's going to go out there week in, week out, and he's going to be in control of your offense. He's going to be the offensive coordinator, or if it's a head coach that's an offensive guy, he's going to be an extension of them on the field. Not make a lot of mistakes. Turnovers will kill you. We always talk about that when it comes to playoff time. And, yes, you'd like to have a playmaker, a dynamic guy, somebody that can move away from pressure.
Right,
Uh,
right.
Not per se like a great running quarterback like a Lamar Jackson. That's great to have in your bag as well. But you got to have somebody that's able to move away from pressure because these guys on the defense are just so fast nowadays. Guys like Micah Parsons, TJ Watt coming off the edge. So you have to have that. And then accuracy, Q, is so big in today's NFL, and that's what everybody's talking about in terms of Richardson with the Colts. Could he be a franchise quarterback anymore because he's just so inaccurate? So you want a guy that's going to be about um, at least 66%, or higher in terms of completion percentage, and then driving the football down the field. So, you know, I've liked a lot of different quarterbacks over my writing career, whether it was pocket guy or a dual threat guy, but you have to have a lot of those things and the intangibles.
There are quarterbacks that have started from the get go. The Peyton Mannings, the Aikmans, 11 games in. We've seen it. Some guys that have been rushed, some guys that have sat because of circumstances beyond their control, a la an Aaron Rodgers, a Patrick Mahomes, right? I remember to this day down the dial when I said they need to start Patrick Mahomes. This kid's going to be a star. And if you recall, I got blasted. I got absolutely crucified. Like, get this guy off the microphone. Has no idea what the hell he's saying. I'm like, trust me, get this kid out there sooner rather than later. So it is sink or swim, but you can't tell. Like, no, nobody really knows until they're out there, and you got to let it play out. Like, and the reason I brought it up is because earlier today, there were reports that Archie Manning basically said Arch isn't coming out. Like, everyone pumped the brakes, which probably screws a lot of plan Bs in the NFL, because I believe there are some coaches and GMs thinking ahead, looking ahead, because they've got bridge quarterbacks. They don't have a path, right? A path, a direction to get their franchise from a rudderless ship to, steady and on course, i.e. the Jets, i.e. Cleveland, i.e. the Giants, i.e. Pittsburgh. So, we'll come back on the air next week and Shador can go out 4 of 6, 65 yards and a touchdown. Well, look at the defense he was playing against. Like, it bothers me no matter what, because I want to see it in real game, live action on Sunday. So we'll start with Sanders. And there's this sentiment still that the Browns are setting him up to fail. The Browns are setting him up to fail. What's the best case for Sanders? Is it going out, playing well, and then the Browns just basically, you know, doing the humane thing and just cutting the kid so he can go somewhere else? Or is it going out, playing well, and the Browns actually think, hey, we can win some games with this kid. Let's start him in week 1. And then the kid all of a sudden gets so overwhelmed. Like, is he in a no-win situation in your opinion?
No, I don't believe that, Q. I think he's going to get his opportunity. He's going to start the game. They said, okay, this depth chart thing. A lot of times I'm saying they just don't have a plan there. So they're going to give him his chance to get out there. Maybe he'll get a chance with Jerry Judy, um, the tight end as well, and maybe we'll see him make some plays. But I think this is a chance for him to shine. Gabriel's a little banged up. We talked about Kenny Pickett and his leg injury, and then they obviously think Flacco's their main guy. They brought in Tyler Huntley as well, so they got a lot of quarterbacks. That, like, all right, they need to make some decisions there. Obviously, Deshaun Watson's not going to play until at the earliest November, December, maybe not at all. So I think that Shador's going to get his chance, and as long as he doesn't turn the football over and he can make some plays, I think that's going to put a little pressure on Stefanski and that coaching staff to say, okay, give him some more reps, give him an opportunity. There still is 2 other preseason games to be played.
Now, is that enough for him to sway them? I again, I think the kid can go out and light the world on fire. But I've said this before, and what's the old expression, right? It's better to dance with the devil that you know than the devil you don't know. Like, to me, it's Flacco. I'm going to stick him out there. If it doesn't work, and I already saw what Shador can do, even though, albeit it's in the preseason, then, we're going on the guise of he's on the roster, he's the backup. Here you go. You're going to get out there sooner rather than later. I mean, everyone's coming out with this. They're setting them up to fail. It's not a Shador Sanders fault. It's a Cleveland Browns organizational fault, because this is what they do. I went through their quarterbacks like Washington back in the day over the last 10, 15, 20 plus years. I mean, you can't find franchise quarterbacks with those teams. I mean, it's a little different now with Washington, of course, Jaden Daniels, but prior to, no. So I asked you this before. If he goes out and plays exceptionally well, does that change your opinion on who should be the week 1 starter?
No, I think they're going to go with the veteran as long as it's Flacco or Pickett are available, and they are going to have Shador Sanders on their roster somehow as a developmental quarterback. I think if they try to get him through waivers to possibly the practice squad, maybe somebody else may grab him up. Um, especially if he plays well this preseason. So they're going to find a way. But it's just like, all right, Andrew Barrett, their general manager, what are you doing? Stefanski, what are you doing? But um, yeah, I wouldn't say he's set up to fail. I think they're going to give him his chance, but it's just odd how many quarterbacks they have on their roster, and we
Bizarre.
go all the way back to the draft. What were they doing? They draft Gabriel in the third round, and then they go Sanders in the fifth round. No plan there. So it's going to be interesting to see how this game plays out tonight, and then how they go forward in camp.
Let me get to a couple comments. Scott was mentioning, I guess, on the Kansas City, better part of a decade being, if not the best team, one of the best teams, 15-1 means they were great. Yeah, I just didn't look at them as a great team last year, Kansas City. I think they were very good. And, I think sometimes records, I know you are what your record is, right? I mean, but how many games did Minnesota win? 14 last year?
Correct.
And then they no-showed, right, in the playoffs. I just saw too close for comfort games for Kansas City. And when I start to see that, either the league's starting to catch up, or maybe you're not as dominant as you once were. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Well, you can look at it that way, or you can always say champions find a way to keep winning. You know what I mean? And they were 15-2, 9 straight division titles. Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Brett Veach, the general manager.
Yeah,
They have that winning formula there. So, yeah, Q, like when they're blocking a kick, you you figure, all right, they're going to make this extra point game's over.
yeah.
But they found a way every single time. But they didn't pull the rabbit out of the hat in terms of the Super Bowl. They just got dominated by the Eagles, and I think that's first and foremost in a lot of people's minds. They say, "Oh man, the Eagles just took it to them. The game is over at halftime. Forget the final score, because the Eagles kind of coasted in at the end." And we'll just kind of see how they do it. And you're right, in that division, you had Denver that made the playoffs, getting better. You had the Chargers. They seem to be ascending. They made the playoffs as well. So it's a tough division there.
Man chimes in. You can analyze mechanics in preseason and some decision making. The problem is the whole sports universe is addicted to knee jerk reactions. They are. I mean, we're guilty of it. We're not only guilty of it as fans, but as talking heads, or being part of the media and hosting shows and covering games and sports. I mean, but to his point, when you get the mothership, shows like that on the four-letter network and other talking heads, they get paid to blow things out of proportion in the knee-jerk reaction. So it's like Shador goes 5 of 6, 65 yards in an 80-yard drive. You got to start him week 1, right? Says solitary Stephen A. That's not the world we live in. It's just not, because then if you start him in week 1 and the kid looks lost, why the hell did they throw him out there? Like Kevin C. in North Jersey keeps asking me, my thought on the Giants, and Jackson Dart's going to play. It's just a question of how many reps he gets in the preseason, because Brian Daboll, probably if he gave him truth serum, Brian Daboll might be thinking to himself, hell, I'm in a no-win situation. Well, you put yourself in that no-win situation, right? Because you also had to sign off along with Joe Shane on not only signing 1 veteran quarterback, but 2. I mean, think about that for a moment. They signed Jameis Winston, Russell Wilson, and they draft a quarterback. So they're like Cleveland 2.0 right now.
And
So
Tommy DeVito.
if Russell Wilson, right? If Russell Wilson goes out and they're 6-3, Dart's not playing. If they're 6-6, Dart's not playing. If they're 6-8, Dart's not playing. If they're still in like contention, in wild card contention. So again, I want this kid to be on the field sooner rather than later, because you're not building around those other 2 quarterbacks that I mentioned. At least with Cleveland, what Flacco is. He might not last, but then you have 2 very young kids that you just drafted, in the same draft around apart. So you can maybe work in that regard with something. But with the Giants, it's like, because what's going to happen. The kid's going to go out and do like a Ryan Nassib and go 20 of 25 for 265 yards. And they're going to be screaming on the fan, you got to start him in week 1. They're not going to do that.
Yeah. And it's instant analysis, kind of like what you were talking about earlier. They're over analyzing these training camp throws and these preseason games. It's got to be up to the coach and the GM to have a distinct plan what they're going to do with a rookie quarterback because we've seen in the past. Think about David Carr. He comes out and he's ruined. I mean, his career just is never the same after he got beat up so bad as a rookie. So and it depends on the team. Certain guys can come in with a veteran team and kind of take over and say, okay, as a rookie, I can kind of drive them to the playoffs like Flacco and Matt Ryan did back in 2008. But, it's tough for these guys coming in because the transition from college to the pros is just so difficult. The game is so much faster and players better.
Why do you think, 20, 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago, we were throwing these guys out there right away? I mean, were we not?
Yeah, well, some of them waited. You look at a Steve McNair; he sat behind Chris Chandler for a couple of years, and but then certain
I
guys
mean,
you just
they're
throw,
they're
and
starting.
nowadays they throw them out there earlier. I think Kudo. I
Yeah,
definitely think they do.
I guess because there's so much. I don't want to say there's so much at stake.
There's money and reputation, and we know these bonus baby early round
Well,
quarterbacks.
there
They'll
you
get a
go.
coach fired if they're
Well,
not doing
that's
well.
true.
The coach
That,
will be gone.
yeah,
And it's a killer decision because some of these teams they're so quarterback needy.
correct.
They
Correct.
reach they reach for the wrong guy, and the next thing you got a Zach Wilson situation there, like Robert
Yeah.
Salah and them with the
It,
Jets, and it just didn't work out.
it's what I guess maybe I was kind of highlighting other quarterbacks, from the past. But you're right. Some of them, even if you go back, right, Jersey Joe, Gilliam, and Bradshaw, they kept benching Bradshaw because he was god awful early in his career and wanted to get traded. And Chuck Noll's like, that's not going to friggin' happen. But Bradshaw goes on to win 4 Super Bowls and the Hall of Fame. I mean, Peyton, different, Marino, you know, Jim Kelly, he was 26. He had his cup of coffee in the USFL. He still started 11 games. Rodgers had to wait behind Favre. Mahomes had to wait behind Alex Smith. I, I think the best decision, this kind of goes against the grain, is when the Giants are 5-4 with Kurt Warner and Coughlin benched him. They go right to Eli,
Right. And
right?
you
Yeah,
look at Doug Peterson and Donovan McNabb, same kind of thing. It was like, all right, it was time to give him his chance. And you talk about Mahomes earlier. Alex Smith, he played pretty well that season. And then they gave Mahomes that opportunity in that last game of the season
that's
to kind
right.
of come in there, and then it kind of led to his path going forward. But it's just tough for these young guys getting out there, and I just think a lot of has to do with expectations and the amount of money that is placed on them. And back in the day, I can tell you it was a clear competition. Whether no matter where a guy was drafted, all the quarterbacks would compete against each other for a spot and opportunity to start and reps. But now it seems a lot of these younger guys they just hand it to them because they're a top 10 draft pick.
Yeah, that's another fascinating point because you and I know growing up watching our teams respectively, I feel there were so many years where, Sims was so injured throughout the course of his career. It was always a quarterback controversy, right? When you start, you go in and you're like, oh my God, I gotta, they just come off a Super Bowl, but guess what? Sims breaks his foot in the rain against Buffalo week 13, and Hostetler comes in, and what does Hanley do? We're going to start Hostetler. And then Dan Reeves, a couple years later, comes back and goes, no, 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 we're starting Sims. Then they win 11 games. Like, as a fan, having a quarterback controversy or battling, I left that at the door 20, 30 years ago. Like, I don't want to deal with that anymore. Like, just throw them out there. Let me see what I have. And then we run with it. Here's a real good point from Man. If Sanders got to play against first team defense in preseason, does well, by all means, make the argument for who should start. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. If he went out there and played well against the regulars, why not give him that opportunity to start? And the thing is, you have to look what's there in the bullpen. You know what I mean? We've talked about this. Pickett, 13 touchdowns, 13 interceptions when he started for the Steelers. He's just
He
not a head and
stinks.
shoulders above everybody. Flacco at this stage in his career, he's not head and shoulders above them. And Dylan Gabriel, in my opinion, he's the lowest of them all. He's just his arm strength and everything. I thought he was a reach in the third round. So, yeah, why not just give him his chance, look at the film, and Stefanski, he's on a hot seat. We've talked about this a lot, and he needs to win now. So
Agree.
go with the guy that's going to give you the best chance.
How about some of these injuries? McKinney could miss the start of the season for the Packers, calf injury. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, I think, carted off leg issue, right? Slater carted off with a leg injury. Man, these you're talking about, all pro, Pro Bowl level players that are getting banged up here.
Yeah, Q, and it's those soft tissue injuries, and the leg injuries. It's like, are the legs ready for the amount of running and competition that comes in camp? And let's face it, in the collective bargaining agreement, they've kind of cut down on OTAs and amount of hitting and off-season activities, and these guys are coming in. Are they ready to roll? And too often we're seeing these, hamstring pulls and Achilles, that sort of thing in the preseason and the training camp games.
All right, let's take a look at some running backs. Player prop seasonal totals, the running back position for you guys that throw a couple shekels or fantasy football geeks out there. You love to talk about the running back, the sexy position. Here we go. Let's bring the running back is bringing sexy back. Here we go. Derrick Henry, Saquon, 2,000 yards. Pay these guys, right? Pay that man their money. Throw out a couple running backs. Let's pull up their props and see if they're going to hit that or go over or stay under. What do you got?
Sure, and the big thing, Q, is
Yeah.
last year was the rebirth of the running back. 16 backs went over 1,000 yards. There were only 12 in 2023, so you saw a mini jump in that. And you're right; these guys got paid and they lived up to expectations. I want to talk about a guy that didn't live up to expectations last year, and Christian McCaffrey.
I knew you were going to start with him.
Everybody is wondering, is he going to come back at age 29 and be that dominant guy that he was in 2023 when he had over 2,000 yards total from scrimmage and over 20 touchdowns? So last year he only played 4 games, uh, didn't have a rushing touchdown or a receiving touchdown. So everybody's saying it's going to be a bounce back. In camp, they've kind of kept him in bubble wrap, letting other guys have reps, and Garindo's banged up already. So I think McCaffrey's going to get his opportunities. Projected to get 260 attempts, 1189 rushing yards, and 9 total touchdowns. So
Wait, how many? How many rushing yards?
1189.
So we'll call it 1,200 because a
Yeah.
couple books, DraftKings had it minus at minus 110, 950 regular season and touchdown prop 7.5. And I'm see, I would be scared to do anything with him because of the injury history. That to me is a factor when I start to evaluate prop bets or the stat line for the season, right? Because he played 16 games his first 3 seasons. He missed a ton of time 3 of the last 5 seasons.
Yeah, 13 games missed last season and he had Achilles tightness in both legs. So you're like, ooh, at 29, the physicality and all the touches he's had, can he do it? Q, I still think that he's going to get 1,000 yards. I think that Shanahan's going to feed him until he can't. So, you know, um, with Jordan Mason going to the Vikings, there's an opportunity for McCaffrey to get some more carries for them. I talked about Garindo's injury. So, yeah, I think he's going to get over 1,000 yards, but you got to be scared about these injuries in terms of putting a prop bet or even in fantasy football selecting him pretty high.
Yeah. All right. We might have the same one here, but I'm gonna throw one out for you. The kid Robinson with Atlanta.
Now I'm a Bijan fan, but now I didn't have him on my list. So,
Oh,
yeah,
really?
no.
So this kid had, as a rookie now, right? You look at the fantasy perspective, even the prop wise. If you look at his numbers, 214 carries, 976, 4 rushing touchdowns. He had 60 receptions, 487. Then second year made that jump, 1,400 yards, 14 touchdowns. Now his projections this year. Now you tell me over under. Now remember, now we're looking at the whole body of work here with that offense in Atlanta and who's throwing on the football. 1,422 yards. Now this scares me a little bit. 12 touchdowns. So goal line situation, but it's also projected out to come out to 62 receptions, another 500 yards. So we're talking about, um, well over 2,000 all-purpose yards, right? 2,000 yards from scrimmage, if you will, and 12 total touchdowns. I haven't found anything for receiving touchdowns. I think 1422 is a touch high. I'm leaning towards the under here. And the reason I'm leaning towards the under is because I think they need to also see what they have in their quarterback. And they got to let him throw the football down the field. And they also have a couple of really nice wide receivers that can stretch the field. One of them obviously is Drake London. So I think they're going to be a passing, I don't want to say heavy team. They're going to run the football, but I think they want to open it up. 1,400, that scares me a little bit. I'm going to play the under on that one. So I don't think he hits that total.
Yeah, Q, I'd have to agree with you. There's just too many mouths to feed in that offense, particularly talk about Drake London. Kyle Pitts is still there. Um, Penix, he's good at those short intermediate routes, so they're probably going to throw a lot of those. And I think Robinson will have a good season in terms of putting up, some yards and fantasy football points. But that's just, I think that's a lot to ask. 2,000 yards total from scrimmage. And then the thing is the offensive line as well. That's been kind of a moving,
Hmm.
parts there. You have Matthews has been a staple at the left tackle, but he's getting along in age, and then some of the other guys they've kind of replaced. So I say that Robinson probably will come a little under those thresholds.
All right. Fire away.
Yeah, this guy's interesting because you talk about he's a featured player now, and you got Aaron Glenn coming in with the New York Jets. Brees Hall,
My guy. Yep.
he's in his fourth season, and last year, 209 rushes, 876 rushing yards. He did score 5 TDs rushing, and then he had a lot of catches. He had 57 catches, 483, and 3 touchdowns. So, I think he's going to get his chances, and the projections are 1029 yards, which is not a lot, and then 5 touchdowns total. So I know everybody's kind of scared off by Braylon Allen's there, and they have Isaiah Davis and Donovan Edwards, but I clearly think that Brees Hall's going to be the guy for Aaron Glenn's offense. And coming from that Lions system, they're going to want to, pick their guy and kind of make him the Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah. I mean, you're asking. So he had last year he ran for 876 yards. Now, 2023 he was 6 yards shy of 1,000, but he averages about 4.3 yards a
Right.
clip. It's funny you mentioned Brees Hall because if they offensively, if they don't let Fields throw the ball down the field, and it's a lot of checkdowns, you're probably going to see a lot of Brees Hall. You're going to see him out of the backfield a substantial amount. I just, man, he to me is 1,000 yard back. Would you say 1,000 and what?
1029 is a projection,
Yeah,
which I think is very low.
I'm hammering the over on that. I'm absolutely hammering the over on that. Like I said, he was, and by the way, he only played in 16 games last year. So if he would have had, say, another buck 30, he would have had over 1,000 yards in a 17th week. So wow, that's really 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 low. All right, let me throw one out for you, and I'm sure we have this one. I'm sure we have this one because I have to appease the Beagles fans out there. Saquon. Now, first, let me ask you this. Do you believe Saquon Barkley will regress in 2025? Now, regress to me, you have a 2,000-yard campaign. Regress to me is, I'm not talking about injuries, but maybe coming back and only having 1,200 yards. That's a major drop off.
It's going to be tough for him to duplicate last season. And I went back and looked at it. 482 touches, including the playoffs. So he touched the ball a lot. I know that a lot of times his contact was down the field because that line was just so dominant, behind Becton and Lane Johnson. But that's just a lot of touches. Last season, 345 rushes. He got to 205 yards, 2,005 yards
Hmm.
and 13 TDs, a career best 5.8 yards per carry. Now that's kind of inflated from he had all those long runs of 60 yards or more. So it was just a season for the ages. And his over under is we'll say it's 1,600 yards. You know what I mean? That's what they're saying. 1,611 touchdowns. So it's just like,
So that's a drop off of 400 yards.
yeah. Yeah, even Vegas is saying, okay, he's just not going to be able to duplicate. And we've seen that a lot from these backs that have had these great seasons, and then they kind of come back, not back down to earth, but they do a little regression. And everybody's going to be hunting the Eagles this season. That blocking scheme that worked last year may not work as effectively, and these defensive coordinators are trying to figure it out. They're Super Bowl champions, but if he did go to, let's say, 1,500, that's still a very good season in my opinion. So
Yeah.
expectations are high for him.
So he had 15 touchdowns. He averaged out of 15 touchdowns 29.4 yards, right? So if I were to ask you how many touchdowns do you think he had from 1 yard out?
I'll say 3.
None. He didn't have a single score from a yard out.
Yeah, and that's what, and you got to factor in the tush push as
There
well
you
because
go.
Jalen Hurts and that offensive line are just dominant with that play. So it kind of takes away from his touchdown total. Um, it's going
Well,
to be interesting to see.
yeah, I thought again, the stats that you brought up, they're perfect to illustrate because you're talking about a back who's now entering his eighth season, a lot of carries. He's missed at least 3 games in 4 of those seasons, right? So I hate to say it's a given he's going to get nicked up based on what we saw last year with all those touches and carries. And defensively, too, now, what are we going to do? We're going to stack the box because we can't have him rip off 60, 70-yard runs. Yeah, I kind of tend to lean towards the under. I mean, what he did last year was absolutely staggering. I mean, it was just an amazing, brilliant, all time legendary season. But I agree with you. I don't think he comes remotely close to 2,000. I'll say this: if he were to rush for over 2,000 yards again, stick him in the Hall of Fame right now. Seriously, if he goes back to back and rushes for 2,000 yards, stick him in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, his numbers are going to get up there, and he has that championship to lean on. Last season, Offensive Player of the Year. I mean, the accolades are piling up, and that would just be incredible. But he's going to be 28 this season, so a lot to ask for somebody at his age, and it's definitely something that's going to be monitored. And all my Eagles relatives are always saying, he's going to do it again. He's going to do it again. But past history with him, you got to say he's going to miss some games because last year he was super healthy. I know he didn't play at the end because they held him out, but every season's different.
And that's thing about it. It's rarefied air, right? OJ Simpson, who did it in what, 14 games in 73?
Yes.
Eric Dickerson, Barry Sanders, TD, Jamal Lewis, Chris Johnson, AP, Derrick Henry, who almost did it again last year, and then Saquon.
Right. And the NFL's been around over
Oh
100
yeah,
seasons.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's just a lot to ask, and that the position has so much physicality. We talk about they're getting hit when they're catching the ball, they're picking up a blitz, and you know. But he did a great job last season. You never can take that away from him. But yeah, I don't think he hits those thresholds.
Yeah, I agree. 5:40 on a Thursday edition, Middays with Q. Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us at Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football Sports Radio 1029 FM The Game every Monday, 8 to 9. Joins me a lot during the football season. All right, you got another back?
Yeah, well, you just mentioned him. I had to bring him up. Derrick Henry, he's gonna be 32.
Mm,
And you talk about, he's getting close to the Hall of Fame. I know my son and I were looking at the all-time rushing list, and he's kind of moving up the list. And last season, he goes to Baltimore. A lot of people say, oh, he's done after he leaves Tennessee. Well, 17 games played, 325 rushes last season, 1921 in terms of yards with a healthy 5.9 yards per carry and 13 TDs. So I mean, he played very well. And you're just wondering at his age and with Ronnie Stanley and that line, getting a little older as well, can he do it again? The projections are 326 rushes, for 1529
Yep.
and 50. I think this one's a little high though. 15 touchdowns. I just think Lamar Jackson may kind of vulture him there in terms of those rushing touchdowns. But yeah, I don't see him slowing down. Um, if he's still getting a number of carries that we're expecting him to, like 20 plus per game, I think he gets that 1529
Well,
mark.
here's the thing. I wouldn't even say it's the carries. Like I look at the yards per carry. So like if you said so like if we just did the math for a second, let's just say he had 325 touches over 17 games. So okay, we'll call it 20 touches a game, right? Now you're talking about if he's going to average almost 6 yards a carry.
Right.
So there's a buck 18. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to have that same pace because that puts him over 2,000 yards. So I think he might have a 1,600 yard season again. To me, and the touchdowns were ridiculous. What do you have? 16 touchdowns. I mean, he was
Yeah.
averaging a buck 13 yards from scrimmage. I think he's a freak. You know, he eats once a day, does a substantial amount of fasting. He keeps himself in phenomenal shape. Has he missed a ton of games in his career? I mean, I have to.
No, he hasn't, and you also have to factor in when he was with Tennessee early in his career. DeMarco Murray, he was in
That's right. That's
a
right.
share situation there, so he had he's a big man. I mean, he's taken a he's a physical player. He's not out running people to the point of attack. He's running through contact. We all know about the stiff arm that he does, and
Eight,
yeah,
eight
he's
games he
incredible.
missed. 8 games he missed in 2021, and he still had 937 yards.
Yeah, he's one of those guys, as you said, a freak, a guy who's he's going to go in the Hall of Fame, and it's going to be interesting to see at 32, can he duplicate that? Now Linderbaum and the guys, Andrews up front and Stanley I talked about, they're a dominant group, but some of those guys are getting a little long in the tooth. And then you also have to factor in, okay, Lamar Jackson and his rushing yards, but uh, everybody's counting on him. I always think of our guy franchise because everybody is talking the Ravens up. I mean, I have a lot of emailers and texters talking about the Ravens, and they're looking for a big season from Henry and the rest of that group.
Listen, I think right now we talk about these teams, the window of opportunity. Cincinnati, Buffalo, Baltimore. I feel like there are all these teams in the AFC, and then I threw Detroit in the NFC. Real quick before we get to that, I just pulled it up. So Derrick Henry averages 4.9 yards per carry in his career. I was curious to see, the highest career rushing yards per attempt. And if you go by 1,000 carries, which, again, let's be honest. I mean, Derrick Henry, 2.5, he did that in 5-6 years. Jamal Charles averaged 5.4 yards per attempt. I can't. We're talking a running back. I can't throw Lamar Jackson in there. I just can't. Jim Brown 5.2, Barry Sanders 5, Bo Jackson 5.4. I bring it up because right now, to me, I mean this. I believe he's a lock, Derrick Henry, to make the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
I think he's a lock.
I agree with you, Q, and I still think he has at least 2 to 3 more years of playing at a high level. And that's what you want to see at the running back position. Do they have that longevity? You talk about these guys getting in the Hall of Fame, and you know, if they're able to play over 12 seasons, that's incredible because it's just such a physical position. You look at Adrian Peterson, how he broke down at the end of his career, and you talk about you know Eric Dickerson, he broke down at the end of his career, and just so many of these guys. It's just so tough.
I'm still going to make the case for Tiki. He averaged 4.7 yards. He had over 10,000 yards. If you add his scrimmage yards, 16,000 scrimmage yards. And, he just didn't have a ton of touchdowns. He had 55 touchdowns, right? I mean, so.
Yeah, Tiki's gonna be interesting as well as Eddie George. They're probably right around the same yardage mark, and right now they're not in the Hall of Fame, but you definitely got to give them a look because at certain points in their career they were just dominant.
Yeah, I'll pull up Eddie real quick. Doesn't have as many scrimmage yards, but over 10,000. 68 touchdowns, and he averaged 3.6. I mean, if you go by that, but I think he also rookie of the year, right? Um, top 2 or 3 in the MVP. Had that monster year in 2000, and um, um, a lot more playoff appearances, I think, than Tiki. But yeah, it's always interesting debate. Real quick before I let you go, you mentioned Baltimore in that window. Um, is that just a product of having to go through Kansas City, right? Because it's these teams are kind of like in your way. I mean, Baltimore's going to have to deal with Cincinnati. You know, divisional games are divisional games. Cleveland stinks, Pittsburgh stinks, but they might stub their toe against them. Then you still got to get through Buffalo. You still got Kansas City. Maybe you got an upstart Denver team. You got Houston. Who knows what Jacksonville is going to do? I look at the AFC, and you mentioned the Ravens because you almost say under this regime, this era of their football with Lamar Jackson, you got to get to a Super Bowl. Like if you're Lamar Jackson to validate your career, doesn't he have to get to a Super Bowl? I mean, he's on that path to being a Hall of Fame quarterback, but we'll have the conversation, kind of like the Dan Marino. Yeah, but the guy never won a Super Bowl. Prolific passer. Obviously, we know what he can do as a scrambler. But do you believe that to kind of validate his career or say, okay, yeah, he's Hall of Fame worthy, he's got to at least make a Super Bowl?
Yes, Q. At this point, he's won 2 MVPs. He was in a conversation last year for third, and he played very well. But everybody's always going to point to that 3-5 record in the
There you go,
playoff.
playoff.
And they had the number 1 seed a couple years ago, and Kansas City came to them, and they lost the game. Mahomes proved that they could win on the road, but expectations are very high with the Ravens. When you look at last season, 12-5, they beat the Steelers in the wild card round fairly easy, and then Lamar played kind of up and down in that Buffalo loss. So it's playoffs or bust. It's a shame that that's the barometer you talk about when you talk about this franchise, but. He's got to get done in the playoffs as well as Harbaugh. Harbaugh's been there a very long time, and people are starting to say, okay, is it time for a change of possibly him? The receiving core, they bring in over Hopkins. Is he going to help them out? Bateman and Henry, obviously, and then the tight ends. You're wondering how much Andrews has left. Likely is injured, and he may not play for a good portion of this season. I do like what they did on the defensive side, though. Their secondary right now on paper looks like one of the best in the NFL.
He'll be a fascinating case because, as we know, there are quarterbacks that have regular seasons or good seasons, like my guy Eli, and then they just blossom and balloon in the postseason and the playoffs. I mean, you're talking about potentially Lamar Jackson. If he wins a third MVP, if he gets to a Super Bowl and wins it, that strengthens his case. Now he's 27, he's still in his prime, but he's one of the few players in NFL history that have multiple MVP awards. And you could have easily said he was an MVP last year. But to your point, it's a great case study because unbelievable gaudy numbers in the regular season. But for some reason, come playoff time, he's just, you got to have that clutch gene. You got to be that clutch guy. And he has a couple more seasons like he's having. I mean, he is, like, I would say the fact that he's constantly putting up these unbelievable numbers, the fact that he basically is revolutionized, right, the perception of how we look at running quarterbacks. I mean, I would be on the fence right now. I would be on the fence. I mean, he's a hell of a quarterback. He just got to win you got to have more success in the postseason. That's all.
Yeah, I agree. And expectations are high for them. Over under win total is 11.5 Q. So, Vegas is expecting them to play well, but they got to get it done. They need that game in Baltimore because if they have to go to Kansas City, if they have to go to Buffalo, I just don't know if they're going to be able to get that done.
Yeah, some teams just they can't get over the hump. They just, think about all those great Chargers teams back in the day with a prolific passer in Dan Fouts, with great running backs, with Hall of Fame tight end and wide receivers, right? With the Jeffersons and the Winslow. They never were able to get over the hump, whether it was trying to get through Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Miami. They just never got over the hump. I look at this Baltimore era kind of like those guys. I mean, you get to a couple championships, but you got to get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, you don't want to be in that almost conversation
No.
like those great Chargers teams, and it's I know their fans have excuses, talking about the Ice Bowl or whatever, and the Freezer Bowl, and then
Yep.
it's just like
81.
sometimes certain teams just cannot get over the hump. I always think about the Eagles when they had Buddy Ryan, and great defense, and Randall Cunningham was at his peak, and they just could not get it done. They couldn't win a playoff game. They won one playoff game with Randall Cunningham as their quarterback.
That makes, and when you think about it, makes no sense. I mean, it really doesn't. They, that 1990 team, they were 10-6. Obviously, the Giants were 13-3 that year when the Giants went back to the Super Bowl and won it. But you're right. I mean, that was your, they had that horrible loss against Washington. Washington came into the vet and beat them. And they had the old man, Art Monk, Gary Clark making some friggin' plays. And I forget,
I think it was
I don't remember who broke I think it might have been either Riggs or Ernest Biner, like broke a long run, like a 20-25 yard run. And you're like, all right, for back then it was a long run for those guys, like to keep a drive alive. And that was pretty much all she wrote. And Eagles only wound up scoring 6 points that day.
Yeah. And they lost to Jim Everett and the Rams as well in the vet,
That's right.
Like,
that's right. Yes. Yeah. Now that was 89.
Yeah. And it was like, Rams were first, then Washington. And it's just like, this team's got too much talent not to get over the hump. And just sometimes talent just cannot win it. I mean, it takes more than that. It takes intangibles. It takes everything coming together. And, some people say sometimes it takes some luck,
Correct.
Maybe we'll see with the Ravens.
And I now thank you for bringing that up. Now I know it was the Rams and it was the running back was Greg Bell that ripped off the long 54-yarder. That's when I knew the game was over. You know why I hate that Rams team, by the way? That Rams team with passion. That 1989 Rams team.
I don't know. Flipper Anderson or somebody
there you
like
go.
that.
Yep. Flipper Anderson made me cry. Got sent up to my room and I ripped up my autograph of Phil Simms after he threw a bad pick, and Flipper Anderson made me friggin' cry. Flipper Anderson is still running through that friggin' tunnel. That was a horrible. The Giants were great that year, and that was a divisional round game because they were built to beat the Niners that year. They were built to beat the Niners, and remember too, in '88, the Niners kind of what, because they did not want to see the Giants in the playoffs, so they sat their starters last game of the season. So the Giants couldn't get into 10-6, but I'm over it. That's okay. What do you have going on Monday?
Yeah, we're just going to continue, all the news notes around the league, and maybe we're going to start talking about like the postseason awards and who's in contention for them. Offensive Player of the Year, the MVP, Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year. So we'll start talking about those things and recapping the games that are going to be tonight. So yeah, we're looking forward to that as well.
All right, brother. Excellent stuff. Outstanding insight. I greatly appreciate you. Don't forget, follow Lloyd on X at Lloyd Vance. Does a wonderful job. Kind enough to always join me during the football season. We've been running Back Your Play. We've been putting that on Amazon, Spotify, and of course, Apple Podcasts. Catch them every Monday, 8 to 9. Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on SR 1029 FM The Game. And during the week with me right here, Middays with Q. Always bringing the knowledge. Appreciate you, my friend. Thank you.
All right, Q. Talk to you later.
All right, there you have it. My guy, Lloyd Vance. Quick timeout. We'll come back. We'll close it out on a busy Thursday.
This is what the Down Beach Seafood Fest is all about. It's about community, it's about friends, it's about culture, right? The food culture in Atlantic County is rich.
champion with us in Atlantic City.
This is Kensington Furniture. 113 years experience and 2 acres of selection. Save more at our best brand sale, up to 70% off. We pay your sales tax. 0 down, up to 60 months interest-free. Lazy Boy, Bassett, Bernhardt, Jonathan Lewis, sofas, sectionals, reclining living rooms, bedrooms, dining rooms, up to 70% off. We pay your sales tax. 0 down, up to 60 months interest-free. Now at Kensington Furniture.
All right, 5:56, couple minutes to play with on this Thursday. Excellent stuff from Lloyd Vance. Kevin C. chimes in before we close out. Q, I remember that game like it was yesterday. Horrible conditions, rain, flipper, run, flipper, run. Yeah, that was and then they wound up getting absolutely throttled by the 49ers in the NFC Championship game. They got absolutely killed that game. That 49ers team, they put up 55 in the Super Bowl against Denver Broncos, 55-10. But that Rams team did not even stand a chance. They actually took an early lead in that game. And then the 49ers ripped off like 30 straight points and beat them 30-3. Oh my God. I was so annoyed. I didn't care that Everett had 3 picks that day. He didn't have it against the Giants, and Montana had a pretty solid game as well in that 89 championship game. All right. Tomorrow, Friday, John Bueller is going to join us. We also might be talking a little boxing with our guy Alex Barbosa. So we'll get into that. Q, who's winning 1994 49ers or Giants team that beat undefeated Patriots. 2007 Giants, they were a good team. They weren't a great team. They were a good team. They weren't a great team. I mean, they just played great when they had to, right? The Niners, the years the Niners won, Michael, they were, 16-2, 14-2. The Giant team that beat them, that was ridiculous. Remember, too, the Giants also beat the 49ers. That 84. Now, if you said 84-84, no one's beating the 84 Niners team, I think, was an all-time great team. They were 15-1 that year. But if you remember the next season, they only won 10 games. They had some injuries, but the Giants beat them in the wild card. What was that, 94-95? I remember that Super Bowl was so bad. It was so brutal. That game was not even competitive, man. But the 13-3 49ers team, they were unstoppable. They were great. I mean, they put up, 49 points against San Diego? I think I recall being on the air at the time. Actually, no. In college, I think I mentioned the Alpert Papunu factor, the tight end. And I said, I think that's why the Chargers might actually have a shot here. Best all-time Giants team, 86, hands down. 14-2, only 2 losses. Dallas, they should have won. Block punt, return for a touchdown. Ed Too Tall Jones picked off Sims, and then they stubbed their toe against Seattle. 14-2. They were unstoppable that year. 14-2 Giants, one of the best teams in NFL history. They absolutely truckloaded teams in the playoffs. Truckloaded. They were ridiculous. They were a juggernaut defensive team. They started the season 0-1. They got to 5-2, and then after 5-2, they lost to Seattle 17-12. They didn't lose another game. They destroyed the 49ers 49-3. They shut out Washington in the NFC Championship 17-0, and they probably could have put up 50 against the Denver Broncos, and they were up 39-20. And that's, remember, Sims had 2 throwaways. 2 throwaways in that game. 86, unbelievable. But all the Giant teams that won the Super Bowl were legit. All right, we're going to start wrapping up. Good stuff from Lloyd Vance jumping on board. Enjoy the preseason football tonight. We will recap it all and overreact and underreact and have a little fun with it. We'll look ahead to the weekend as well. And as I mentioned, big fights coming down. Hard Rock in Atlantic City this weekend. We'll talk a little sweet science, little boxing as well. Have a good sports Thursday. As always, be safe, be sound. It's Middays with Q. I'm Rich Quinones. Hasta luego, with you.